Eloquent as Sachin is, so apologies for having paper with me. I want to start with asking you a question, and it's related to the question that was up here earlier. We all face problems in our life, like every day. Even those who said everything's good, there are still problems. And then the question is, how much of the time do we use innovation to solve those problems? What I'd like to do is start by saying thank you again for the introduction of it. My company is called the Human Alarm Clock, and we get people to think differently. And I really believe that innovation isn't really saved for just geniuses or Silicon Valley startups. I think it's in every single one of us. And it's something that all of us can do if we embrace the right mindset. So I think the first thing to start by saying is, for me, innovation is a byproduct of solving a problem. If you really want to solve a problem, you will find that innovation will just hit you at every stage. So, first of all, what I'm going to do is use a little acronym to give you my personal take on innovation, and in true Human Alarm Clock style, which is going to get you thinking, my acronym is SLURP, like when you drink your tea in the morning. Okay, so what does SLURP stand for when you're being innovative? I think the first S for me is the most important. It is sitting with a problem and feeling the discomfort of that problem. If you just push it off, one person put procrastination up there, it's not going to happen. But if you actually sit with the problem, things start to come to mind. So that's the S. The L is, you really have to laugh in the face of everyone else's disapproval. My whole life, from when I was a kid to even now, when I'm in my 50s and my poor children have to deal with this, they're now at university, but my whole life I've been that different kid, that one who always did things the opposite way round. When everyone was desperate to come to England, I was desperate to leave England, and I moved to Eastern Europe first and then to India. So I always did things differently and a different way round. When I was 18, when my father was absolutely desperate for me to study to become a chartered accountant, all I wanted to do was DJ on local radio. So you get an idea that I'm always trying to do things differently. So the second one is laughing in the face of disapproval. If you can get out of your head, oh, I have to conform, I have to do things this way, I think you'll find you'll be more innovative. And I also think that Sachin said that as well, you know, not looking for the approval of other people, but just coming up with new ideas. The U of SLURP is unleashing your creativity. I thought, Sachin, your example of splitting the office and looking at it differently was a great example of unleashing creativity to solve a problem that you were facing. The R is to have a razor-sharp focus. You have to be focused on the problem, sit with that discomfort, unleash your creativity, and laugh in the face of other people if you're really going to be innovative. And the 3 Ps, spot patterns, be persistent, and be passionate. Right? Now, I know those are just words and you're like, okay, so what? She's giving us a Gyan lecture and this is TEDx, we came here to hear something different. So I'm going to go back to one of my mentors, the late, great Alec Banamsi. He was an advertising genius, he was a Padma Shri from the President of India, and he was also a theatre aficionado, he did lots of plays, etc. And he taught me 2 things when we were writing our book, Let Me Hijack Your Mind. He said, all my life, Vandana, I have done things, you know, everyone says all the advertising campaigns that I came up with, Liral, the woman in the waterfall, and Lalita Ji from Surf Excel, etc., they were from his stable. He said, I do things to make people happier, and I do things to bring people together. So I think when you really want innovation to happen, whether it's at work or whether it's at home, if you can keep those two at the heart of why you're solving a problem, you'll come up with much more innovative ideas. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm going to start with a really big macro example and then come down to me and you and what we face. The first one is there's a company called BP, British Petroleum, yeah? Petroleum company. How do you think they're likely to do in the next 10 years? They are facing an existential crisis, right? They are not going to survive because governments, people are saying we don't want petrol. Now think about how are they going to survive? Well, interestingly, BP sponsored one of the biggest food and beverage conferences in the UK. And their senior advisor was up on the stage, senior director was up on the stage, and he said, you know, you're probably thinking, why is BP sponsoring a food and beverage conference? This is what he said. We know that our business is going to die. But what we do know is that we've got lots of forecourts where people come and fill up their cars, right? Now, when you fill up your cars in India, you don't even get out of the car. You sit there and somebody does it for you. In the West, you would actually have to do it yourself, then you'd have to go and pay somewhere, and then you come back to the car. And when you go and pay, the chances are you might pick up some chocolates, you might get a coffee, and then you come back. Now, fast forward and think about when you all have electric cars. You are not going to be on the forecourt for 5 minutes. You're going to be on the forecourt for 20 minutes. They have you captive for 20 minutes. So guess what? BP is repositioning itself as a food and beverage company because they realize that they have got you for 20 minutes and they need you to spend money and they want you to spend it on food and drink. That's innovation because of a crisis, an existential crisis. And that's innovation because they have a massive problem that they have to solve. They want to make you happier in the process because if you're happier, you're going to come back to them again and again. So that's why I say that innovation is a byproduct of you solving a problem. Now that's very good, Vandana, that's BP. I'm not BP, I am somebody who's working for Infosys. Well, I'm going to give you 2 examples from my family and then 1 example from my previous company. Story number 2. I bet you the women in this audience have this problem a lot more than the men. How many of you go home in the evening and think, it's going to be easy to figure out what to eat tonight? Yeah? Yeah, that's a problem, right? Imagine this. 2 children, this was a long time ago, one age 6 and one age 4. And then on top of that, there's me and my husband and my mum and my dad and my mother-in-law all living in the same house. Do you think they wanted to eat the same food? No. And who did it come on to kind of figure out what the menu was? I spent more time worrying about what I was going to feed the family than I did on the business, right? Because it was like every day it was trauma. Zara, my daughter, would storm off age 4 saying, Mummy, I don't like this food. My mother-in-law would turn her nose up if it was anything fried, etc., etc. And it was a nightmare. And yet we go through this every day. Existential crisis for me. What did I do? One day I said, I have had enough. I said, you are all sitting down around this dining table and you are not going to move until you have 60 dishes, 60 dishes that you all agree you're willing to eat. And they all just looked at me and they thought I was joking. And I said, I mean this. You are not moving your butt from this table until you've written it down. And Zara, age 4, was like, Mummy, I can't spell the names of these foods. How can I write it? I'm like, Zara, I'll sit next to you and we'll do it together. So we did. It took 2 hours. I did get up and give them water, but they weren't allowed anything else. But at the end of those 2 hours, we had 60 dishes that everyone was prepared to eat because they knew that maybe the next day it would be their favorite dish. What did I do with those 60 dishes? I put them into a calendar and I made an 8-week calendar. And you know what? You do not remember what you ate 8 weeks ago. So you could just repeat the menu. You know exactly what you need to buy for the week. You know exactly how long everything takes to cook. You can get everyone else involved. It was so easy, and that calendar lasted 7 years. The only reason it stopped working was my kids went to university in the UK, and now there's only me in the house with my dog. Up until then, it worked perfectly. So that's an example. Again, I was in a crisis. I sat with the problem. I wanted to bring people together. I wanted to make them happy, and that's what I did. The other one, I mean, I'm sure many of you have children. I bet your children love studying, don't they? Love it. I was that child as well who absolutely hated studying, and I had attention deficit, ADHD, and unfortunately my son also has it. So trying to get my son to study was a nightmare, and I tried sitting with his books, I tried everything. And that's when I learned that you have to, empathy is more than just going to meet the person where they are. It's about holding their baggage, like really feeling what they're feeling. And when I sat down that day next to my son, I could see these tears in his eyes. He didn't want to be there. He was so stressed. How on earth was I going to get him to learn? And so I said to him, okay, Jay, do you know there's something called the International Space Station? And he said, yes. And I said, well, what if something breaks down on it? And he said, get Amazon to send it a delivery. And I was like, unfortunately, Amazon doesn't reach the space station. And he said, so what do they do? And I said, well, actually, they 3D manufacture parts. And he said, oh, how does that work? And so I got out a box, like one of those plastic boxes that you put food in. And I said, well, we'd have to work out what the dimensions of this box were, draw a diagram and send it to them. He said, I know how to do that. And I said, no, you don't. And he said, no, I do. And then he sat there and he drew the diagram. And suddenly ratios, proportion, and mathematics was interesting for him. And it changed his relationship, not just with maths, but I found a way to make things interesting for him so that he would study. And he's now off at university, surprise, surprise, studying psychology. My final story is from my office. When I ran an office in India, we started it in 2006, and I decided that I wanted to get 80% women with children working for me. So I had a place in Pune, in Goregaon Park, where I had about 60 women who all had kids. Most of them, sort of Maharashtrian background, and they were chartered accountants because I ran a training company. And some of them were really exceptional, and they would come in for their annual appraisal, and I would say, we'd like to give you a promotion, and we're going to give you this pay rise. And they would literally burst into tears, and they'd go, I can't accept that. And then when we got to the root of it, it was because their families would be unhappy with them earning more than their husbands. Now, you've got to remember, this was back in 2006-07, right? When we got down to it, it wasn't actually their families, it wasn't their husbands, it was their mother-in-laws who really, really felt that, I don't want my son to be shown up. So what we did was we did a bring your mother-in-law to work day. And we brought all the mother-in-laws in, and we garlanded them at reception. And we brought them into this room, and we had a big projector up, and we talked about the work that their daughter-in-laws were doing and how useful it was to the country as well as to the company. And I kid you not, they all walked out, and they were straight on their mobile phones ringing up their best friends saying, do you know where I was today? And all of a sudden, their relationships with their daughter-in-laws got better. And all of a sudden, they actually were happy when they started getting promotions and earning more. So I think what I'm trying to say is that it made sense to really sit with the problem, really understand the people who are unhappy with the problem. And through that, you'll find that innovation will come every step of the way, no matter what you're doing. And so I'd like to leave you with the 3 words that I use for my company, and I would encourage all of you to think about when it comes to innovation. Be playful. See the world like a child and experiment like there's no tomorrow. Be courageous, and Sachin said this as well, be courageous. Break the rules where they stand in your way. And the 3rd one is be curious. Always ask the question, what if? What if I did this? What if I tried this? what's the worst that can happen? Because the worst that can happen is you'll come up with a bad idea, and the best that can happen is you will innovate and change the world. Thank you very much.